What is going on, everybody? Thanks again for joining me for another BG-Cast Wednesday live podcast. So, as we wait for our guest, I have a couple of announcements I would like to make to everybody. Well, actually, only technically one announcement. But after this week, BG-Cast on Wednesday is going to be getting pushed to 6:30 p.m. as opposed to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And the reason why is new job. I want to make sure everything is pretty solidified. This is a really good position I've gotten myself in. I am super grateful. I feel like I manifested something very awesome and very amazing for myself at this point, this is honestly what I've been looking for. So very happy about that. But for the time being, we are going to have BG-Cast at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So that was pretty much it, guys. Other than that, I'm waiting for my guest up. Here she is. We have Miss Heidi Luv from Unfiltered REZZ. I've been looking forward to having her back on. We had such an interesting conversation last time. She blew my mind, looking at the history, the very occult history of Mormonism. And I'm really happy to have her back on again to be chatting with me about the Masonic connections to the orphan trains, the Finders cult. And she brought something up very interesting to me the last time we spoke, something about the gene of Isis, the etymology behind Genesis itself. So I'm going to bring her on. Hello, Heidi. How's it going?
Good. How you doing there?
Good. I'm hanging in there. It's good to see you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty good.
Awesome. I was just making sure because, sometimes. I'm so happy to be back, and I'm excited to talk to you about this. And I think it's kind of a deep rabbit hole that most people just kind of dismiss. Sorry, I'm texting my husband to bring my folder because I forgot about.
Oh, you are all good. I was literally, I was kind of doing the same thing as we were starting up.
The binder, that binder with all my notes in it, behind the bed. Thank you. Sorry, I have a huge binder because I'm such a dork. Full of notes that I studiously take and do all the things. And I forgot about the Finders cult. I grabbed all my other notes and then forgot that one, but they're in there. So we'll be definitely including that. But it's kind of a rabbit hole that people just dismiss as crazy. When you start talking about the orphan trains, people go, well, yeah, okay. Yeah, I know about that. And I'm like, well, do you though? Right.
And I'm with you. And this is so, what's interesting is I was doing research about a lot of this stuff. One of the things that stood out to me, I guess you could say, is the fact that there was not very much information, especially available online. I managed to dig deep enough, though. I found some interesting things, but I gotta tell you, it was very bizarre to me. That there wasn't very much on this. I mean, I used practically 10 different search engines. I looked up a whole bunch of anonymous search engines. I made sure because I was using Google DuckDuckGo, and I'm like, DuckDuckGo used to be good, not anymore. And then I started using all this, and dude, every single one, it had the same results for everything. It was really fucking weird.
It's annoying.
It is. I luckily found a couple things though, but I want to dive into the orphan trains with you because I listened to your episode that you sent me, where you were talking about. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head the symbolism of the woman that had to do with the orphan trains. I guess she was permeating the fields with her blood or something. Let's have you lead off on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's actually with the cabbage baby part. The cabbage baby is Diana of Ephesus is an ancient goddess, and she has all these boobs all over. It's weird. It's a very peculiar look. And I actually have some slides for this, which might be fun. I can add to our screen because then people will be able to see what we're talking about.
I like your presentations. I think this is going to be great.
It helps me keep, like, where do you go next, and then if you can do, let's see, present, share screen. And then that way people can actually see for themselves, especially when it comes to research. I like people to know, like, yeah, some of this is conjecture, but a lot of this is not. And so, some of this is ancient studies, some of this is things like that, but a lot of this is just pure history. And so when you're talking about pure history, it's kind of funny that there would even be an issue, right? Like, I mean, why? Why is everything hidden? Why? Let's see, is that showing for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I could see it
Okay.
pretty clear.
The boobs everywhere. And they they say they're breasts. To me, it brings a whole new meaning to pod people, right? Like, look, when you're looking at this and you think, okay, pod people, or back in the day, there's Soylent Green, this weird show my mom was telling me about. And I'm like, okay, this is all pretty strange. But regardless, to say, we got test tube babies from somewhere. And whenever they release things to us, like, they've been around for a really long time. And, it doesn't take a lot to figure that out. Like, you can see it with cell phones or computers or whatever, and it's just one of those things that we know that they don't give us the full story, like, ever. And so this is one of the things that I just kind of fell across, right? Like, and I'm like, well, what does this have to do with anything? Like, why is this coming up every time that the Hindus actually discovered IVF so long ago? And this is part of this. And this is like this weird pod fertility goddess. And it does make you wonder, it does make you wonder, like, what did they know that we didn't know? Why do they?
I mean, we've seen this fabrication of our history and the doctoring of our history. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was somehow edited out.
Yep. It's very hard. Like you said, you can find this goddess. Finding her associated with IVF and whatnot, no, you're not going to find that. And so you really have, like you said, you have to dive and dive and dive and dive. And it was hard to even find anything on. But there was one story. Now, this is history, like folk tale, like I said, in the Hindus, that they discovered IVF years and years and years before 1978, which is admittedly when the first test tube baby comes to scene, July 25th, 1978. Robert Edward and Patrick Steptoe make this embryo project, and they were the first ones to coin zinc spark. So there is literally a spark of life when people are created. You can't just put the egg in the petri dish with the sperm and then boom, it's fine. No, that's not why. And the reason why is because we need this spark of life. They electrocute a little bit. And
very interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yes. And it makes you really wonder, going back to things like, well, how did they figure that out? Right? What were they doing? That's what I always think of. But my brain goes weird places, and then I'm in homunculus land, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, my brain. But like this kind of stuff, when we see these weird things and then going with what we know, right? Like these actual facts, that's a fact that I told you. It's also the process of why they know which embryos are going to be good or not good when they do.
Interesting.
Because they'll say, oh, we saw this and this, this baby or whatever, this embryo had the spark, and they'll see it. And so this all goes back to ancient times. And then you see these postcards pop up at the turn of the century, and they're weird. They're just really weird. And I'm like, okay, so why were these cabbage babies all over, like, in Getty postcards, right? And
that is pretty weird. I'm going to agree with you on that.
Yeah. Like, what is the point? And they're always these affluent looking people, right? And these babies coming out of cabbages. And I noticed, for the most part, now not every single one, but for the most part, she's always in a red dress, right? Like, and of course, that I always think of the occult whenever I study anything. I'm like, oh, Scarlet Whore of Babylon. Are we making a new world? Oh, we are making a new world at this time. Oh, I wonder what we're doing over there. I wonder what we're making it with, right? And here's another one that really shocked me, because if you look at this one, this is a French one and it says repopulation, but there's some key things in here. They're making babies.
I'm
in this
looking at it. Yeah.
will, basically, right? The man has a key and she has a lock, if you notice, or he has the lock and she has the keys. Yeah,
I
right.
see. I see. That's a really bizarre symbolism in that, in and of itself.
Absolutely. Everything means a lot more than what people know, right? And if you look above him, that looks like a square and compass, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've got time, you know, at midnight, the start of a new day, right? Like, and then you think of Chronos, and everything means nothing, but everything means everything when you know certain things, right? Like when you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you go, huh, what are they telling us? You know, what are they telling
And that
us?
is, I mean, even just looking at that, I mean, just kind of looking at it closely, yes, it's very interesting the way everything is depicted. And again, the red dress, the children under the dress, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Strange. And then you do have the stories of the homunculus and the hermits at this time, and the little men that they've created, and the book Liber Vacay, the book of the cow. I don't know if you got into that, but that is bananas. I'll shout out that to Juan. Juan has one-on-one podcast. He has a wonderful lot of work on the homunculus. He's the homuncologist. He's done a ton of work on that, and I do more like over to the cabbage babies, but right, it all fits in. So when I heard that whole thing that he presented, and it goes back to Paracelsus and all this stuff, I'm like, wow, this is very interesting, right? Like, I mean, oftentimes they talk
look
about
at that
these little
alchemical,
men. Yeah, these little men that they create. And I mean, okay, these are lore, or are they? You know, this is like back to fairies and weird things, but like we can say, oh, that's bananas and it's whatever. But then why did these stories last the test of time, right? It's just like, why do we have Thumbelina? Why do we have Fee Fi Fo Fum with the giants and Jack and the Beanstalk? Why do we have right? Like, why is Mickey a magician? Right?
The
Like
seven dwarves, all kinds of
yeah, exactly. And so we'll wait before we go to that slide. So at this time, I think it's really interesting to note that these foundling hospitals are popping up everywhere. Now, remember, this is like 1869. And America's newish. And so everybody says, well, yeah, but then everybody died coming over, and that's what it was. And I'm like, but as a nurse, I know the one thing that's going to die is not parents. Parents don't die before kids, because kids are, you know, they're not developed. They need nutrition. They need, you know, they're more susceptible to disease. They have all these bigger problems than adults have, yet we're missing all the grownups. Where'd they go? You know? And we've got this lady, and we, in the red dress, we're still thinking about these cabbage babies. And at the same time that they're popping up all these foundling hospitals and saying that these kids are coming out of nowhere, right? The orphan trains start running because Charles Loring Brace, a Mason, started this orphan train system in 1854, and it ran till 1929. So all of this is happening, basically. The reason why I'm kind of all over, because it was all over. It was all at the same time.
Well, that's another person I couldn't find much on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you can cut me off always. I can't see you.
No, you're all good. You're all good. No, that's another person. I mean, very, very skim amounts of information on this individual. And like I was saying before, it just blows my mind, because, you know, we have so much documentation of a lot of earlier things, but just for some reason, these couple of instances, we just, for some reason, don't.
Right. Yeah. And they're just like, oh, he was a guy and he just cared about kids and he was a good guy. Right. And you're going, Okay, but how many kids, relatively speaking, remember, America is new. It's supposed to be not that populated. We're all kind of shoved over into the East Coast at this point. And so you tell me, how many kids did I already tell you? I probably ruined it for you. You probably know. But for those that don't know, we'll do a fun guess. How many kids do you think just rode the orphan trains at this time? We're not even talking about the cabbage babies. We'll get back to them. But just these orphans, right?
I know from what I saw, from what I was doing, it had to be upwards of like at least above 10 to 20,000 or something along that number, right? Or was it? Yeah, I think it was something like that.
So here's the thing. I could understand maybe 10 to 20,000. The population growth at that time, maybe so. But this is 250,000 kids.
That was my second guess, like 200,000,
Right?
250,000. Yeah.
250,000 children that are just chilling. And here's the thing, people are like, well, back then the women were having babies because they were just all hookers and all this crazy stuff. And you hear this, right? And I'm like, yeah, but they were way better than us then, like as far as their morale system, really. And there wasn't that many women that were doing that. But even if there was, let's say all of them were fine, great. You could only have one baby a year unless you're having twins or multiple births of some
Mhm.
sort. And that's really high risk back then. Are they living? Is the mother dying? Is the baby dying? Like, I mean,
Well, you also have to consider
uh,
back then too, infant deaths were, and child deaths were a big thing. Like, I mean, it was not very. I mean, that's why you had a lot of kids back then, or that's why they would always say,
absolutely.
you had so many kids just in case a few of them didn't make it.
Yes, 100%. And so you're hearing these like factions that I'm telling you, and you're like, wait, they don't, they don't make a baby, right? They don't work together. And then the next slide I have, because I'll get into these other things, but I just want to go through these slides because I'll forget. But
And you
then
got
we get into
Rael on there.
something. Yes, Rael is a huge importance because you see these weird things. And this is a real website, you guys. Like this, I am a
Mhm.
conspiracy theorist, 100%. But this is real. And so when they made Dolly the sheep, right? This was something that everybody was
Yeah.
kind of worried about. And then this starts popping up, and Raelism, they made it a religion. So they can't
Mhm.
really be, the thumb of the law can only go so far. And I'm sorry, this connects to like everything because Epstein had this weird ranch and he wanted to impregnate all
Mhm.
these women and all this stuff. So we get into Real here, and he runs a cult basically, but he calls it a church. And they claim on 12/27/02, Beausoleil, his lady cohort, claims that they made the first baby and that
Mhm.
they had videos, and she went under oath. This is not like she just lied and said it. This is another picture of him. And I think I have Beausoleil. Yeah, here she is.
Yeah.
And so, and nice Star of Ram Fam on there.
I
But
know. I remember him. He was in. Because I remember he wasn't he in court based on. I mean, I've
yes,
seen his documentary. He was in court trying to really push human cloning up against
yep,
Congress, and they weren't having it at the time.
no. And for all those that say I'm cuckoo crazy conspiracy theorist, this made 60 minutes. This is not like
Hmm.
this is
This is no. It's real.
mainstream.
It's
Yeah,
real.
this
Yeah.
is real. And so they say, of course, that this baby is real. And it really puts into perspective. Remember, they said this happened in '02. And of course, guess what? They named the girl. It's a girl. So for
That is
fun. Well,
that's like, yeah, no, if somebody thinks this is a conspiracy, this has been around for quite some time. I mean, even when he built his
yep.
landing pad, he built his landing area. I think it was either he said 2027 or 2028 that they're making their
Yeah.
return, or that was his supposed prediction.
So the first baby ever cloned, they named her Eve. Like
Very
Adam and
interesting.
Eve. It always goes back to that, right? And then we've still got these. So we've got that in our pocket that we know something is up with these people on realism, because also you have to know, again, in the 90s, they already said they did this. And they say she lives in the Middle East and that the parents, they actually did a press conference and the parents were too afraid to show up. And so she stood there kind of like a moron and just stood there with her hand, you know, in the air kind of thing, waiting for these people to come. But I mean, I don't know, was it a publicity stunt? But either way, we know they're up to something, right? Like this, they don't do things for nothing. They're trying to tell you something. And if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you'll hear it. But then at the same time, here in the past, we've got these babies coming out of like nowhere. And this literally, for those that speak French, this is for sale. These babies are for sale. This was a real thing. And they used to deliver your babies by postal service. This is real. You can Google it.
Yes, they made it
And
illegal in like the 1910s. You weren't allowed to do it anymore at that point, I think.
Yep. And so it's a very strange predicament that we've got because like here we are with all these strange happenings. And this is Charles Loring Brace, just because we already spoke of him. So I did find a photo at least of him. And then we're going to get into more of all of this, but I want to lay the foundation so that people know why I care or what does it matter, right? Like why do we even care about this? So at the same time, we are shifting these orphans around everywhere. And these are kids that just supposedly have no one. And he thinks they'll do better off to go out in farmland, okay, out west. But west was really Midwest back then because nobody had gone west. And they're going to go work farms because it's good for them to be outside. But I have a question for you. Have you ever seen The Princess Bride?
Yeah, it's been a long time, but yes, I have.
So who did she fall in love with? Not the name of the guy, but what was his job?
Oof.
Do you remember? I'll tell you.
It's been like 10 plus years since I've seen that movie. Yeah.
So he was the farm boy. So
right.
Farm Boy. Right. This is all over the movies. This is all over for this period of time. And we've got all these shows like Little Orphan Annie and all these little shows. And I'm like, okay. So if you were going to do something where you infiltrated a whole society, okay, because many people will say America was built on religious freedom, but I venture to state that it was built on masonry. I'm sorry.
I agree with you.
Yeah. And if you guys look into it, there's factions and everything. There's always a left-hand path and a right-hand path. And we always know that, you know, people be people and they're going to be the evil side and the not evil side. So, I mean, then you see these shows like Brave New World and all this stuff. But one thing that I know for sure, if you were going to infiltrate a society and you wanted to get in the door and you know, you say you used men to do it, I don't think that would work. Women, it's a possibility. But kids, I don't know too many people that would just walk away from like a helpless child, right? And the orphan trains prove this correct. Yeah. The orphan trains actually clone. So they would put up signs about when they were going to be in town. And these kids were treated. A lot of people talk about slavery, and I'm not being mean about slavery at all. But for slaves, they paid for them. The children were free. There were little to no background checks on these things. And you just went to the store that day and picked up a kid and brought him home. So I guess if you were some nefarious human being, you know, stuff happened. They were put up for adoption because they were taken to theaters and or masonry lodges and put up on a stage so they could be looked at. They would come check their teeth and examine them like a horse or whatever. And the older boys would always go first because they were, you know, farmhands. And so basically this is like worse than an indentured servant.
This is, I mean, just hearing this concept, I mean, if you were to even try to bring this up in today's world, people would just look at you like you were fucking nuts. But this was, it's just,
it sounds crazy.
Yeah, it's just so crazy how not that long ago, this was a completely okay thing. At least in the eyes of everybody who is participating.
Yep. I mean, I just find it interesting that this was just okay, and then nobody ever says anything about it like they do with slavery or anything else, right? Like it's just shoved under the rug that these kids were not even bought and paid for. They were just given away for free. And once a year they'd go check on them, and if they wanted to get back on the train and ride it again to somewhere else, then they could. But that was about it, and they really didn't keep track of anything. So, okay, at the same time, remember, we're in the same time frames because the trains are running from, let me make sure I have that date right so we can have our context, because context is everything. So from 1854 to 1929, the trains are running. And then all of a sudden we have something called the incubator babies. And these incubator, I'm not against incubators. That's not what I mean. I'm just
Mhm.
saying, all of a sudden, at a time with the World's Fairs, in the World Fair exhibits, this started. And it was very strange because you have to know, we've got all these kids. There's so many, we don't know what to do with them, and we're going to put them on trains. And okay, so I'm not trying to be crude here, but this stuff starts right at the same time frame, and yet we're going to save all of these little tiny preemie babies when we don't even have homes for regular sized kids, where these kids would be survival of the fittest. They wouldn't be here. Okay.
I was
I'm
gonna
not
say, yeah.
against saving babies. I quite like the idea. I'm a nurse. And Dr. Tarnier, he was a French inventor. He figured out that there was a way to save these babies with the chicken incubator. And he repeated and constructed this for babies. And he wondered, is this something that we can do for people? And he quickly found out, oh, guess what? We can. Okay, cool. And so he goes ahead and does this, and he saves a lot of babies. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I am saying I find it interesting that we're doing that at the same time when we have nowhere to put anybody. And this guy's name is Martin
I would agree.
Cooney, and he's the doctor, but he's not a doctor. It's very interesting. And how much money does this take to take on the road? This is like a on the road trip. And they've got these wet nurses there to help feed the babies. And there are tons of them. Okay. And so this is what this looks like when they're on the road with them. And they literally are giving these babies away like they're a good, like stuffed animal at the ring toss. I mean, you don't have to qualify for anything. What mother in their right minds is going around giving away all these kids? Because I don't buy it as a mom.
I don't
I
buy it either.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because like even in those times, like I mean, granted, we can maybe talk about the 1920s, but even when they first started these orphan trains, the premature children and giving them play, that to me, it just contradicts everything we know by supposed the narrative of modern history and how things
Yes.
were. So like these photos are very telling. It's just very interesting.
Yes, and at the same time, like, I'm just saying, this is strange, right? This is a strange situation. And then in other countries at the same time, I just feel this is very important to mention. In Ireland, between 1925 and 1961, this is a real thing that happened. People can go and check this out, but upwards of 9,000 children have been possibly reported to have been killed or found dead, whatever, in Ireland. And the identification was tried to happen. This was a real news article. I got to add this one in, but it's called Tuam. Okay, Tuam. And you guys can go look this up. It's in Ireland, and they found over 800 tiny baby skeletons. And at the same time, there's this thing called pickled punks. I hope I added it in, but I don't know if I did. But if not, maybe we can Google
And
it
they
real
even
quick.
got a sign. I mean,
Incubator babies.
this is so strange.
And this is the one that is for getting your baby by mail. Oh, it will be delivered by parcel safely to the address on the card attached. Like so weird, but yet we have all these kids, but we're bringing them over from other places. Okay. So this is Tuan, allegedly a alleged right of the murder. It was an actual grave containing remains of babies and children have been discovered at a former Catholic care home in Ireland where upwards of 800 have died, but actually they've came out since then and said the number may be as high as 9,000. So these incubator babies plus these babies, I mean, plus the kids on the orphan train, what the hell's going on? You know, let alone we got Benjamin Franklin with all kinds of shit found in his basement.
That
And
doesn't surprise me.
yeah, it's just, I mean, and at the end of it all, right? It goes to this is that funny show I told you about in the 70s, Invasion of the Pod People. But all of this is going on, okay? And it's strange to me. It's strange to me because I'm like, why would you continue to try and save everyone then? Why would you what are you doing with a bunch of dead babies at the monastery? Well, here's my question to you. We go back to the homunculus photo. Who are the hermits?
The hermits.
The
Weren't
hermits,
they?
the priests.
Weren't
Who are the
yes?
hermits? Oftentimes they're celibate, all alone, many times priests, working on enlightenment, higher level stuff, whatever. At
Mhm.
that time, who are the people that have enough time on their hands to make a fetus and shove it in a cow's body, rectum, all this weird stuff like you don't even want to know. The Liber Vacay is cuckoo crazy. You got to get a dog dick and the biggest one you can find and beat the cow with it. Oh, it is the most craziest stuff you've ever read.
All right,
But like
I did write that down. So that now I'm I guess I'm
it is
intrigued
bananas.
and
Juan did a
yeah.
great job, yes, on this. And so, because it's a fascinating, right? But like, who's reading this, right? Like, this is crazy. I mean, your normal mom and dad at home, even in the 1900s, I dare state that they're not wanting to go find a dog dick to beat a cat with. Okay.
No.
I'm just saying it's all so far fetched, but then you have this surplus of infants and not just infants. Where the hell are they all going? Oh, that's right. They're all here in America, in the brave new world. Okay. We've got all these kids coming and all these kids on trains. We've got 250,000 here and 6,000 of the incubator babies, and we're mail ordering babies. And we've got the Ireland scandal, but they're not alive. And I'm like, okay, so what were they working on? I mean, I'll have you do, yeah, a little Google here in a minute. And I've got some pretty interesting facts. But this also
awesome.
happens as a kind of a weird situation. I like to quote, this is one thing that the royals never travel without, which is blood. They take their own blood supply with them wherever they go. Why? Because they're Rh rhesus negative. And they never travel anywhere without blood. Now, I know you want your true blood, your blue blood to stay pure, but let's get real. Okay, that's for my pictures. I'm just going to shut that so we can talk. But I just find this so interesting on every level because we've got a lot going on at the same time. And meanwhile, America's, being settled. And so I'm like, have you ever heard that Americans all kind of look the same?
Mm-hmm. I've heard that from Canadians. I've heard that from a lot of people who come over here and visit.
Yeah. And I would venture to state you and I could look like brother and sister. Like, honestly.
I mean, we do
Yeah,
have the same color hair and around the same color eyes also. So yes, that is
exactly.
very interesting. I
Yeah,
have a
and
joke
so
that there's a sorry, I said
no,
there
go,
definitely is
go.
some kind of interesting bloodline amongst us.
Yes,
And we've chatted about that before, but I've even tossed around the joke, like, how all of these, powers that were, these elites are all distantly related. I guarantee you, I 100% guarantee you some of us are to a degree.
I'm sure. I'm sure of it too. And yet, where the hell are they getting all this information from? Or better yet, what the hell are they doing? Right. So you find the mass graves, and at this same time, the same time frame, right before the baby surge in America, about 1500s. Okay. So a little bit before. So it fits the time frame good because this happened before. So you get this influx of something called pickled punks. Have you heard of these?
No, this is the first time.
Oh my gosh, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Okay, I've never had to live Google it, so we'll chat until I find it, and then we'll share with the audience because it is the most bizarre thing I think I've ever seen, and I actually thought it was a lie. Okay. I thought that this was couldn't possibly be real because I was like,
I mean, beating the cow with the dog's dick is
right.
definitely outrageous. It's definitely
I
outrageous.
and I love this picture because it speaks 1,000 words. So I'm gonna go ahead and share screen again because it's so fun. I've got to add it to my files because I found it at a later point and I was like, this is fantastic. Okay, so especially who's holding it, especially who's holding it. And so I just think that it's going to tell us a story. It's definitely going to tell us a story. And so I'm going to share and we're going to go here. Can you see this?
What?
That is
So
a
that's
baby in a jar.
and that's Leonardo DiCaprio, a young Leonardo DiCaprio.
Very young Leonardo DeWoke Caprio.
The-
These are real. These are real. And I found it funny.
What?
Somebody else, actually, Brandon, shout out Brandon from Mana Daily Podcast. He said, Heidi, they keep them in mason jars, mason. I was
that's
like, oh
that's.
my gosh. Yeah, I missed that one.
I should send you that meme I had the other day. How hermetically sealed mason jars are made. You'll probably get a kick.
So funny. Oh, I would love it. And so look at all this. This is not like 5 in a jar. Just for context, I like to share this with people. So King Frederick III of Denmark, he had his own collection of pickled punks. But Elise Aldrovandi, do you recognize that last name?
That sounds
I
very
do.
familiar.
Well, it's probably in those 13 elite bloodlines that we don't talk about. Not the ones out front, the back ones. But anyway, people can look into that. His name was Elise, Alisse, Aldrovandi. He's Italian. Guess how many of these suckers he had?
Ooh,
Just for fun.
It's definitely gonna make me squirm a little bit, but at least he had to have over 50. We'll put 50 on the table for that one.
How about 18,000?
Oh my god!
And he
Oh my
wasn't
god!
he wasn't the only one. And they had all these babies, but the more effed up they were, basically, the better. And a lot of times, if they were twins, even better. And they would pay this extra money for them. Like this one, I know the story behind and see how weird it is. It's actually a stone child that turned to stone in the mother's womb. And all these weird, I mean, just really weird deformities, right? How many deformities do we see nowadays?
Not very. I was gonna
Right.
say like very rare. It's not as
It's rare.
not very frequent.
It's not like it
Yes.
used to be. But how malnourished, I'm going to shut this. How malnourished would you say people are, especially in America? You
I
know,
was gonna. Nobody's malnourished here in America. Not anymore.
they are. They are, because all they eat is
Oh,
crap and deficient food that
that's
isn't worth anything, right? Like, go to
that's
another
true.
country, they
Yes.
look so much healthier than us, right? And so all these things are happening right before. So literally the 1600s, and then what do we have in the 1800s? We get all this influx of babies out of nowhere. Meanwhile, these people like Jean, I can't even say it, Ailleboust, 1582, again has a collection. The other guy has a collection. All these royals have collections of these really weird deformed babies. And I'm like, they were, and then we got the dead Catholic babies, hate to be rude, but that's what they were. And I'm like, no, they were experimenting. These were the
That's
accidents. These were, and this is real. I'm not making this up. Like, I know it sounds made up. I know how it sounds. And so when I first saw it, I did the same thing. I'm like, this bullshit. It's bullshit. It's a lie. Like, this can't be real. Not in my America type thing, right? Like, you think, yeah, no. And on top,
it
yeah,
sounds bizarre, but it's real. We're looking at it. I mean,
we're looking
it's
at it. And yeah, mason jars and mason jars. And the Masons are running this, and at the same time going through World's Fairs. How better to show off your creepy shit that you did? How better to show it off and say, we saved these guys. Look at, we saved them. Meanwhile, they know they're freaking alien babies and want to take one home to see what's going to happen. Right. I mean, I'm not saying they're full alien babies, but
no, I know what
they
you
were
mean.
probably beaten with a dog dick. I don't know. Like, I mean, like, this is strange and unusual, but it goes so much further than that, because like I said, we get to all these babies that are dead in monasteries and stuff. It makes so much sense. The nuns can have a baby by the priests that are, doing this. Are they carrying the babies? Are they putting them inside the cows like what they said? Like, are they trying to see what worked the best, or this one doesn't look quite right, or this would never fit in, right? This is, and trying to genetically modify a perfect race. Sound familiar?
Sounds very familiar.
Right.
It's
And then
almost as if there was this this weird ancient form of experimentation. It's very strange.
yes, and it goes clear into, of course, the royals are all over it. I mean, because why not, right? But also it goes into Hitler at some point later, because where the hell did he get his ideology from? Oh, sure, he was crazy and had a micro penis and whatever they want to say about Hitler. Cool. But a lot of people followed him. Like, I'm sorry, you can't be that crazy and get a whole country to do what you want. We're not talking about a little cult. We're not talking about the Finders cult or some silly crap, right? We're talking about a whole damn country, multiple countries. And so what were they looking for, right? Like, what were they wanting to do? What were they wanting to have, like, with this perfection, right? Well, there's more than just white people involved. Everybody wants to talk about the Jews and Hitler hated Jews, and okay, fine. But I know he did, but there was more to it than that. There was,
There 100% was.
He eye teeth. He was looking at the size of your eye teeth. He was looking at certain genetic things in your body. Yes, he was looking for white people, no doubt about it, because I truly believe he was a subscriber of the ICE theory. And this goes into the Vril Society, which talk about what you want to try and find some hard research. Good Lord. And that's an occult society, right? And this goes into, guess who? Blavatsky and eugenics and the Gates. And it goes so far up that I sat there and went, this can't be real. Like, everybody wants to talk about Bill Gates' dad being a eugenicist. No, Bill Gates' mom worked for IBM, and we all know IBM was way in with the whole Hitler deal. And she had major connections with like Hitler stuff. And so it's kind of shoved under a rug, and they put the dad out front. But whenever they put the person out front, it's not the one. That's not the one, right?
Nope, it's always somebody else. They have to have the half truth or the plausible deniability of some kind. They have to throw in there.
Yes. Yep. And they have to have a cover. And then all of a sudden, after all this weird shit that I'm telling you, right? Like, okay, we've got these orphan babies, and those orphan babies, by the way, they're just let go at age of 18 and given, like, I can't remember, I think it's $100 to go about their merry way. They marry people into society. They become people in our society. And now we're talking about genetics, and it's worrisome. Now, I want to throw, this is new, and I'm so glad we actually delayed our show because it's going to be a good one. Okay.
I'm happy to hear
so
this. This is going to be awesome.
The day that Diddy got arrested, the day that Diddy got arrested, everyone on the board of 23andMe quit except the president. All of them.
Ooh, that I did not know. I know there was a few interesting things that went down in that whole situation with Mr. Diddler, but I did not know the 23andMe thing. Yes.
So my thing is always like, why? Right? What the hell were they doing? And then if you go into, have you heard about Diddy's ex-wife that died and her book? This is
I've heard about it. Yes.
And that they were doing sex rituals on her at 9 months pregnant, right before the baby came out, and all this weird stuff with you guys should look into it, extremely prominent actors and actresses. And so I'm like, he knew. And they, I'm sure he threatened somebody a little too much, right? Like, whatever. The same thing, like, why would Diddy be so important for this community? And then we got Epstein on this side for this community. And somewhere in the middle, like fucking always, I'm going to drop the F-bomb on this one. I normally try not to. We got the Mormons, because the Mormons they're always popping up. They're just always popping up. And I'm like, what the hell? Yeah. Right.
It's so interesting how they always, I mean, even the one thing I noticed, they came out with a new show now. They're kind of like starting to come out with these more and more. And I've been kind of
seeing Sex Lives show. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Guess what? Go check out that show and check out my post about that show and look at the last names. And there is a huge scandal that actually went to court and was dismissed because of the time frame about abuse and satanic abuse, SRA abuse. And the last name will be Levitt, but I'm not going to say the first name because he's an attorney. And, I'm crazy and I'm a conspiracy theorist. But when everything came out, he just took off and moved to Scotland and bought a castle. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, just
took off. Yeah, he just took off. And he was the attorney general, by the way. And also the daughter that was named in this crazy SRA story, which the daughter wrote the book. It's not like some other crazy this is the daughter. She wired herself with a wire and got him to tell her he was sorry and all this years later. So this is called Paper Dolls and Cowboy Boots for anybody that would like to check this one out. That's a book that she wrote. But this has to do with the president of the church, prophet, seer, and revelator that's 100 years old. 100's really old. I wonder how he stays that way. I don't know.
I have a couple of ideas.
Maybe some genetic things. Who knows? But yeah, so the prophet's daughter was implicated on that case. But also the prophet is a member of Skull and Bones Society. And the prophet is a member of Allen Key. And the prophet is pretty occult as hell to me, in my opinion. Now, I'm just some lady that's probably angry and, whatever. But then people should go read something called the Pace Memo or they should go watch my last show because it will blow your socks off. And
Definitely gonna
I'm
check it
telling
out.
you, it is the worst travesty with abuse that I could ever think of. And what did the Mormon church do? Hit it all. Also, by the way, fun fact, the Mormon church does their own internal adoptions, but they were knee deep in the Operation Underground Railroad business. Neck deep. Okay. And they're trying to distance themselves far, far away from old Timmy boy. But there's some stuff on that last show I did that will blow your guys's minds, because it blew my mind and it is crazy. When you talk about divine right to rule and these bloodlines and the weird stuff that we're talking about here, that church, the people that were high up in the church in the 70s, they made a subdivision so that they could all go be awesome together and live together. Guess what they called it?
Go
It's
ahead and
fun.
tell me. I'm curious.
Mount Olympus.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like there's
So,
like that was just the pick of the litter with that one, I guess, then, huh?
yeah, exactly. And so I'm just saying that this all goes back not just to the church, because the reason why I say also is 23andMe isn't owned by the church. Sure, it's not. Neither is ancestry.com. But guess what? FamilySearch.org is where all of those genetics come from. And the Mormon
Mhm.
church does own that. And they started that as a pilot program way before any of us peons knew anything about DNA testing. Okay. They're obsessed. And I do mean obsessed with genealogy. Every Mormon member has to trace their lineage as far back as they can trace it. And my grandma actually served as a mission president of a genealogy mission. She just was all day just inputting shit in the computer.
That is.
So they're looking for something. They're looking for something.
So could it potentially be this gene of Isis? And
My opinion is all of this has to do with these genes. And why do I think that? Well, I've got a couple things for you that are clinical. Let's do clinical, because some of this seems crazy, but a lot of it isn't. The only conjecture I have made right now is about what I think they were doing. No, the fact is the pickled punks exist in copious numbers. The fact is the cabbage ordering male babies, where the woman is affluent and going and picking out her designer baby, was real. They were sending them in the mail. The fact is there was a whole bunch of dead, misformed babies all over the place right before they started shoving these babies out the door. The fact is all of a sudden America needed to be populated and babies are everywhere, to the fact that children have to be put on a train because they don't know what to do with them all. And I just find it really interesting. I mean, that's all real. That's all fact. The only conjecture I made is what I think they were doing with it. The fact that clonate is real, the fact that all these things are real. I'm not saying if you have an IVF baby that's bad, or if you were in an incubator that's bad. No, all that's great. But this all comes from somewhere. They weren't trying to help humanity. If you guys don't notice, they don't really like us all that much. I mean,
no, they don't.
yeah. Like if they cared about us, like they would be putting their work into something else, right?
I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, even with Clonade, Clonade was behind Dolly the sheep, if I'm correct, right? Because I still, even to this day, I very vividly remember it. I know it was in 1996, and I remember it being all over the mainstream media that they because I've been into this stuff even as a kid. I was always into the weirdest
because it's
shit,
fascinating, right? Like it's super fascinating, and the transhumanist movement is huge. And guess what? There's the transhumanist movement, but there's also the Mormon transhumanist movement, because of course the Mormons have their hands in everything.
Now enlighten me on this, because this to me, I mean, to a lot of people would say it would sound like an oxymoron almost, but knowing where you're coming from, I know this is very legit. So please enlighten us on this.
So the thing with LDS people is, number one, they do believe they have the divine right to rule. And I almost think I'm really knee deep in a Masonic like rabbit hole right now about
Mhm.
what exactly was Joseph Smith as far as his masonry. Because the last time I spoke with you, I was wrong about one thing. It wasn't just John Dee's work. Those weird sigils that I showed you, the weird satanic looking sigils, they're Solomonic magic. I found them in the Lesser and Greater Keys of Solomon. And so you have to understand, they really believe that that's why they wear a garment, right? That's that, like Nimrod, right? Like
Mhm.
we're getting into some weird stuff here because Nimrod wasn't a great guy.
Mhm.
Why do you want to have the seal of Melchizedek, the seal of your priesthood? That's their priesthood for their upper echelon, be the star of Rampham in a seal,
That's a little
right?
interesting.
Yeah. And so all of this goes back to, I truly believe the Mormons always wanted to populate the earth as much as they could with their seed. And why is that? I don't know. Maybe he was the earliest Epstein of his time. That's why polygamy started, right? Like, and they say Joseph Smith had very fair skin and blue eyes and was, he was some Irish, he was Scottish. Like, it's just interesting.
It's
And
interesting
what
that
do
we
I
see
yeah,
that same complexion with a lot of these individuals. They always just happen to
absolutely.
be, for some reason, fair skinned, very light eyes, and light blue or light green eyes. It's
Yes.
always weird.
I think it's actually by design because actually it's all about genetic manipulation. And when you get into some things, here's a fun one for people. When we talk about fair skinned people and light skinned people and this kind of weird stuff, look at the Basques. When
Mhm.
you look at this people that were highly isolated, and there's like a big to do about them possibly being like the ancestry of Atlantis, right? Like this is
Mhm.
what they say. They're the highest percentage of RH factor in the world. Now, here's the thing. The RH factor, my grandma had it, and it was discovered in the 1940s. But that seems very strange that it's only ever happened once ever, right? Like everybody says evolution, cool. Why isn't there 30 more?
I agree.
Like, yeah. And so this happened and they understand it. There's only one other thing that's even, I guess, better is called RH null golden blood. And there's
The golden
fewer than
blood.
50 people in the world that have this. Yeah. And so they have this, now we're going to get into lore or conjecture or whatever. But basically, this is the only thing you can say about this stuff because we will never know because we're not in the club, right? But they
Mhm.
say that O blood, especially O negative blood, is like the pure bloods, the blue bloods. This is where you hear that term, blue bloods, and that it's actually pretty rare, and that this is the blood of gods, and that the O positive blood is mixed, half human and God, right? And especially if you come from a lineage where you have the null or the RH negative in your family. And same thing for any of the other blood types. And there's certain things when you go in and study, like traditional Cherokee people believe the O blood, they have more, apt to have spiritual abilities or whatever, even if it's negative or positive, they don't care. In Asia, you can add your blood type to your Facebook profile because the personality structure is so distinct for each one. And so, they know something we don't know. That's for
Mhm.
sure. Uh-huh.
They
Yeah.
they 100%. And it's funny that you say that because I am O positive.
Yeah. Yep. Me too.
So,
And so, but
wow.
but my families are negative, and so I just
Mhm.
happen to get the positive. But you carry it, you carry it because you've got a positive negative when you're a positive like that usually. And so it's strange to me, but this gene of Isis, right? I was looking a whole bunch for this, and they'll say it's lore. They'll say this is just made up Egyptian lore. But basically, this gets into the Anunnaki story, right? Of us being created and that they made us because they were bored and manipulated our genetics to be slaves or whatever. And then they fell in love with them and had babies with them. Sound familiar? Like the Bible? Like, and the
Mhm.
Nephilim went down and had babies. And I'm like, it's always the same story, you know?
It's always
And they
it's a
had,
very
yeah.
similar story between all of these cultures. So I looked up a couple things on it. So I have the generations of Isis.
Awesome.
It's something that I found on it as well. It's more of like a biblical page, but it kind of goes into like in how in Genesis they say the generations, and they talk about these generations of Adam and things like that. So I know it is. It's a lot of there is something there, though. You're absolutely right.
Yes.
There's
Mm-hmm.
something there. It's because we're not in the club, like you said. We're not in this
Mm-hmm.
big club.
Yeah. We're
You know,
not
we
going to
don't know
be
100% what it is, but I think it's like this far from our reach. We're like so close on
so
figuring it out.
close. So close. And so, there's also the God gene. There's also Zachariah Sitchin's work with star seeds and Dolores Cannon's work. Like, why will they basically tell us the things without telling us the thing? Right. They're like, oh,
Mhm.
it's Gnostic. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Now, the only other thing I can think of, and believe me, this is also going to sound far fetched, but it goes back with Hitler. This whole thing with Hitler and that whole situation is, the breeding program. If possibly they truly believe there is a line of Jesus. Have you heard this?
Yes, I've done a show on this for sure, for sure.
And yeah. And so it makes you wonder, you know,
Well, that's why I was saying I joked that there was some kind of bloodline between us. You know, I
right.
think there is. You know, because I mean, when we apply as above, so below. You know, to so many different principles in this life, we see that things are always very similar on every single scale. So, if these powers that were these elites have a bloodline of their own, why wouldn't we? And maybe that's what they're
Right.
looking for. And you know, maybe that's why
Oh,
they're doing. I know
that's
so
what
many
they're looking for.
a hundred
2020
percent.
2020 was a huge DNA grab. But
Mhm,
don't think for 1 minute if you didn't participate that you're safe.
mm-mm,
Because every baby, unless you were born at home, you never saw a doctor in your life, never had anything done like that, then maybe, right? But
mhm,
otherwise, I'm saying they have it because there's something called a PKU that's done at birth. That's the heel stick of the infant. I've done many of these and they have to be perfect. If they're just slightly out of line, we have to do them again. And they're a pain because the babies move a lot and they take a lot of more blood than you might think. And these
mhm.
can store for so long, so long. Now, knowing that you can store them, before I tell you this next part, I'm going to Google this really quick. Let's see.
Yeah. I was gonna say I threw out this hypothetical equation out there. I mean, you have to think. So let's say Jesus and Mary Maggs did have kids. Let's say they did, and let's say they had 4 kids, and those kids had kids, and we're talking over the course of 2 millennia at this point around that period of time. It would be very reasonable that at least 144,000 would be in the gene pool.
Yes. Yep.
It is not a far-fetched number to think about at that time, especially if you're thinking like the spreading out of these genetics, all over the place.
Absolutely.
And what's funny though is like even though COVID was a massive DNA grab, I think a lot of the people who they were looking for were the ones that didn't want to didn't want to take the
Yeah,
vaccine in the first place.
exactly. Exactly. All right. So I'm going to add this. Let's see if I can do it again. It says it's sharing. Okay.
Oh, here we
Let me
go.
show
I
you
got you
this.
right here. Boom. There
Can
we
you
go.
see me? Okay.
Mhm.
Can you see this mountain vault?
Yes, I can.
Well, that's the Mormons' vault. That's the Mormons' vault. LDS Granite Mountain Records Vault. Okay. Let me show you this little picture of it. Hold on. it's very interesting to me because when you look at what the vault has inside of it, do you see these drawers?
Yeah, it definitely looks almost like a morgue kind of, but it's not.
But tiny, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it's for genealogy.
So this is where they keep the files. This is where they keep everything in there.
I mean, you know, this is a guy standing there. So this is to put it in context of how vast this is. I'm not saying that they have the government's PKUs. I mean, heaven forbid. Why would they have that? But I'm just
Why not?
saying, you know, it's kind of the same size of drawer. And, you know, they're doing this for our safety, right? They're
For our
doing this
safety.
for our
Everything's for our safety.
safety at
Mhm.
birth for the PKU. So I'll just push stop for a minute. So the PKU test is to make sure that if you have a certain amount of milk, it makes you like retarded because you can't break down the enzyme
Uh-huh.
if you have this. Okay. And when I use that word, I mean it in the clinical sense. So please don't at me, people. I'm being serious. So it's the phenylalanine and they can't break down proteins. Okay. So here's a funny thing about people that possibly might have maybe Nephilim blood. This is one of their traits. Microcephaly, which would be caused by it's a known factor in handicap stuff. Okay. It's also a known factor. That's why it elongates the head, like we see in ancient Egypt, whatnot. You can't make melanin. So you're super freaking white, including your retinas. And you also are extremely light sensitive and have extremely light hair and eyes and all of that. So I found that super interesting that is pretty much the traits that our friend Hitler was looking for, right? These things.
Uh-huh.
But also they do this test to make sure, but I've never seen one in 25 years come back positive. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do it because maybe they really are protecting us. Or, you know, maybe they're looking for hybrids. Just my thought.
Even what you were talking about earlier with the O positive and the O negative blood, I've been seeing that float around a lot recently. And
Mm.
one thing when things start to surface like that from an energetic standpoint, I start to pay attention. Like if it just pops up like once or
Yep.
twice, I'm like, okay, cool. We'll put it on the shelf, save it for later. But if it continuously
Right.
starts circulating around, then I kind of start paying attention because then it's in the collective energy almost at that point.
Yes. And then also, what did they start doing to our babies around that time? They started something called the cephalic index and they started measuring heads, right? Oh, we
Mm-hmm.
got to measure your baby's head and all these things. Oh, okay. I'm not saying it's not a bad or good thing. Cool. I don't want my baby to have anything wrong with it either. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that maybe they don't tell us like why they do what they do. I just showed you the whole side of a mountain blown out. Why do we need that? What the hell?
Exactly.
Like, what's going on there? Like,
I could think of so many better things that could be used for than a genealogy vault. So it's like, why?
yes.
Why have this
Why?
massive? It opens the door to that question that what do they know that we don't at this point? And
Oh, yep.
I
Yep.
do think there is some kind of intermingling or something, or some kind of hybridization along the line that has definitely occurred.
Yes. And I think that it's very interesting. I talked to a guy, and this episode will be coming out, you guys. His name is Chris Horlicker. Have you talked to Chris yet?
No, I have
He'd be
not.
great. He'd be great for you. I'll have to send his details. But
I would appreciate that.
he
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, of course. He didn't write this book, but he like put it together and he's going on shows about it and stuff. And it's called The Apocalypse of Yalna Valkia. So it's a horrible way that I can't even spell it, but it's all about Enoch's line. Okay. And they traced it. They traced this line. And when I say traced it, I mean EM78 is supposedly Adam's line. EZ827 are Atlantean lines, and EM81 are Nephilim lines. And like they can trace these down to like Poseidon lines and RH negative stuff. And he has like the literal DNA codes in this book. Like this is scientific study. This isn't like a guy just talking to talk. Okay. These are studies. The guy that wrote it didn't want his name on it at all. Because yeah, I'm sure. And I've looked this stuff up and this stuff is real. These codes are real genetic codes. These codes are not made up. And he speaks about how why Enoch's line spread, when Enoch's line spread, and how it relates to the Bible. Now, he's not a big Bible pursuer. And he was like, and this is why, the alien theory is more correct with the whole other stuff. And people are like, you interview a lot of people that don't believe in the Bible. I'm like, yeah, well, listen to the story though. Like if you know what you know inside your heart about the Nephilim and the fallen angels and the watchers and all the things, and you're hearing what I'm hearing, all it does is verify what I know. It doesn't devalue what he knows. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, and even speaking of that, to me, Christianity in its original form is where it should be. And I think, that when we look at it in that context and we look at the earliest versions of it and what it once was, I mean, it paints a very different picture. So like, I mean, it allowed for a lot of this. It wasn't as restrictive, as it is today after the 5 councils and everybody else got done with it. So
well, and it was called the way because after Jesus was crucified, he came back and only gave all the old laws were dead. But what did he tell us? Love your neighbor, love one another. It was far more about that than all the rules of old, right? Like these rules were a reason because, a lot of stuff was going on then, just like it is now. And I mean, I'm just saying all this was predicted. This was predicted. And you can believe in the Bible and still read the book of Enoch. It should have been in there. You can believe and you cannot believe it, but at least inform yourself, because here's the thing. Even if you only go off of the Bible, that's good, fine. But you have to know the rest, because if you don't, they're going to be playing chess while you're playing checkers and you're not going to understand anything.
I'm with you. That is an awesome analogy that you used for it. And it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah,
Almost.
Exactly. Like even when this guy was talking to me, and he's great, Chris is great. He was talking about like Kronos and Saturn and these different names that the gods were known by, but also he's saying things that I'm like, he's like, oh yeah, and this one line, Adam's line, was sacrificed more, and Adam means ruddy and of the earth, and so Adam's line were darker people. So I'm like, think of the people that they sacrifice or kill first every time somebody goes somewhere, right? Like, oh, we're here in America, let's kill all the brown people. Like immediately, it's immediate, and why do they do that? Because that's God's people, right? Like that's the first thing he made, right? I'm not saying we're not all God's people now, but like in the context back then, I mean, that's the line. They knew whose line was what by then, because the races weren't so confused anymore back then.
I got to get those genetic codes from you, man, because that.
Oh, you got to do a show with him on that. It's so interesting. He'll send you the book. It's so interesting. I'm telling you, I read it and I was like, huh. And people were really upset, like I said, because I did one on Atlantis with him and I did one on Masonry with him. And I did the Masonry one first, and then I'm doing this Atlantis one second. And I wanted people to have the basis, because I'm like, this is so like, erase whatever bias you have and just hear him, just hear him. And I was dinging all over, but I'm like that anyways, because no matter what somebody says to me, I know what I know, and I don't have to force you or anybody else to know what I know, I can share. That's great.
No,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah.
You know, while I got you here, because that's actually one of my favorite topics is Atlantis for many reasons. What is your opinion on that? I mean, why do you
Oh,
think we cannot find it? I have my own theory as to why we cannot
man.
find it, but I mean, we did find the orichalcum. That was one of the biggest
Yes.
things. That was the kind of the, I guess, blew the top off the bottle when it came to starting to find hard evidence of this place. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, we have the orichalcum. We have lots of stories, but there's so many different, I guess you could say, uh, projected locations of where it could have been.
Right.
And I
He
and
has
I
a
and I,
really big theory on that. I'm not sure about where, but I definitely think it existed. I definitely think it existed.
I do
And
too, for sure.
I think that there was relics, and I think there were things that were there that they absolutely hid.
Hmm.
You're never going to find that because they can't afford for that to happen, because they were mentally, like, from what this guy was talking about, and not against anybody, what they are, anything, but like, they were advanced species, wouldn't fight, wouldn't do this, wouldn't do that, and they were more about like knowledge and this kind of stuff and peace and all this, and they were really against like cannibalism and pedophilia and all the things. So like, they don't want us to know that. They don't want us to go there. This goes back to Moloch and
We
Canaanites and like
we can't
crazy
have a
stuff.
bunch of enlightened people walking around. I mean, we
Definitely
can't
not.
we can't have any people who are aware walking around. That's It's just bad for the
No.
machine. Like, yeah.
Well, and the weird thing that he did tell me too, and he'll tell you this as well, but he said many of the skulls of the ones that were the Nephilim skulls, the EM81, his conjecture is that they outcasted the Nephilim and actually punished them because they were missing front teeth, a lot of them. And he said,
Hmm.
what's the one thing in the Bible over and over that God says we shouldn't do, right? Like, over and over and over. So if you stole something back in the day, they'd cut your hand off, or if you did some bad pedo stuff, they'd cut something else off. But if you ate something that you shouldn't eat over and over again because you acquired a taste for it,
Hmm. I know
maybe they'd pull
exactly what.
your teeth out. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we all know. I mean, not everybody, but the Nephilim did like to eat us. So like that was
Yep.
something to consider in that one.
Yep. And he says that's like a pretty big, thing for that. And also why they would be so hyper focused on murdering brown people or black people, because they're closer to Adam, to piss off God, basically,
Hmm.
to make him more mad, because they do it all the time. And it's crazy to me. Like, you look at the way they do that, they'll wipe them out first. And also, they're the only people, usually, not always, that will have an oral tradition record, right?
Hmm.
You can't erase that. You can't burn it. You can't get rid of it. It's inside that grandma or that person or whatever. And they have different stories than us, right? They have stories of the same types of things, these indigo
Hmm.
children, where people would come down and, impregnate their daughters, and they would have these babies, and they've got actual proof that Native Americans carry that weird gene that I was telling you about, where they'll have albinism, or they'll have, whatever. And I'm just like, I mean, you can throw it all out, but like, that's a lot of scientific evidence. This
Hmm.
is when we're talking about genetic codes and vaults and PKU tests and, back to cabbage babies, like all these things where these people came basically out of nowhere. I mean, really, and we're doing it
It's
again. They're doing it again.
it's so,
They're,
and
yeah.
exactly. We do have a very, we have a lot of evidence for this, and it's
Yes.
interesting because we have all of this evidence in like these different departments, and
Yes.
different areas, and all we're missing are like these little puzzle pieces.
Yep.
that can help us conjoin these different areas together to actually get the full story. And yes, they are doing it again, most certainly. And
Hmm.
I think they're like, you know, we've even talked about this before. They are definitely manipulating our genealogy right now as we
Oh,
speak.
for sure. They say we have all this junk DNA. Bull crap. You know what? They're coming up every other week saying, "Oh, we found the VMAT2 gene and it's just you're going to hear God in your brain now because it's just you and only 40%." Do you know, I don't know if I told you this, but only like half the population has an inner monologue. I was like,
I don't
"What?"
I don't know
That's
how I do.
real.
That blows my mind because like I have such an inner. It's almost like an inner movie in my head sometimes.
Mine never shuts up for sure. And they have something called, funny enough, listen to this, the Apple test. It's like right in your face. So the Apple test is if I say to you, can you imagine an apple? And like I can smell the apple, taste the apple, see the apple, like it's almost a smell the apple, right? Like, so you get a 1 through 5. Like some people are like, well, I know what an apple is, but I mean, I can't do that.
Mhm.
I don't have that piece. And so, but every single time they come up with these little coded, oh, the first baby's name was Eve, and then the Apple test, and this and that. And it's always back to the same thing. It is always back to the same thing. It just cracks me up because it's right there. It's just right there.
They keep
Yeah.
that symbolism. They always that's how and that's why I've always said and I will probably die on this hill at this point. That symbolism is the prime language of this reality. It
Yep.
conveys more than just a message. It conveys an energy. It's almost like it works with this reality to a degree. It has like an
Mhm.
energetic effect on this reality, and that's where one thing, you know, I'm like I tell a lot of people, you know, start viewing everything through a symbolic lens. I mean, I can't really
Yes.
I can explain it to you, I guess, to the best of my ability, but what helps me understand might not help you. But if everybody started doing that, I think the general collective would definitely
Yep.
see a very interesting picture painted right before them.
Because you can't explain it away. Like these are real
Mhm.
historical things that actually I can't believe they left pickled punks like like, but then the fact that a star is holding one,
Yeah,
man,
that's
come
kind of a
on.
very and I had never even heard that until you brought that
Yeah,
up tonight because and then now you've sent me on another
it's a
one I
whole
gotta look at.
weird.
It really well it's
Oh,
interesting because the one I've been on I haven't been on it too hard because like I don't certain unless the rabbit hole is very interesting and has a lot of you know, a lot of really good stuff that kind of puts these puzzle pieces together for me like we've talked
mhm.
about. I don't but the most interesting one is that the man who was in the car with Princess Diana Dodi Faria is Pascal Najati.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It's my last guest brought that up. I thought you would find that interesting.
And also, you guys, just so you know, the lady that owns 23andMe, the one, and I cannot say her last name, Wojanovic or something. Her sister was the one that owned YouTube, right? And
Mhm.
she just suddenly died because she like had cancer or something in August. And then she was 47. She was super young, or 48 or something like that. No, she was 50 something. She was young. Okay. She was still young. And her son died of an overdose right before that, too.
Oh man.
Like they're hiding something. And
Oh
it
yeah.
has to do with this whole mess, this whole thing. Because if they weren't, then why? Then why? Right? Like, what? Why would it matter?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like I think like yeah, and I mean I guarantee you, you know, even based on what you were saying with the crazy sex rituals that Diddy was doing with his wife, that this
Ugh.
even ties into this as well. I mean, we see this interconnected network of, you know, all of these very, like I said, they're pretty soon enough the puzzle pieces are going to emerge.
That's
Soon
what I'm
enough.
hoping. Yeah,
I'm
that's
I'm
what I'm
hoping as well.
hoping. Because honestly, and every time, so you guys, episode 105 is about the pace memos, and 104 is we touch a little on Atlantis. And so they're my two most recent ones. I really tell you guys to check it out because the thing is all of this connects. and I always bring up the Mormons because I was one, but the thing is that they are a top power. In fact, I dare say they are more wealthy than they are portraying, and that they probably own most of America by now. Their top holdings are Microsoft, like Nvidia, Alphabet, all these groups that Tesla, and Elon Musk's number one guy, by the way, is Jared Birchall, who's a Mormon, who doesn't even have the things to be in that. And that's coming up with the Rotary Club. And guess what ties into it? The freaking Mormons again. And all of this is not about a religion. The religion has been used to hijack God. That's all it is. And me and you have talked about this. Like, I believe in God. I'm not a Gnostic. I'm not anything like that. I'm nothing, because I just read the Bible and try and figure things out, because that's all I'm going to do, period. Yeah. At this point. But here's the thing. It still matters. It still matters. You got to know. You got to know what you're playing with, because they're going to try and lead you down a weird rabbit hole. And transhumanism is the next big thing. You guys.
And I've talked about this just not only with you, but many other guests. Like, the public mask is the plausible deniability. Why do we have all of these Satanists, these Masons, all of their Catholic priests, church ministers, beloved people in city government, all of this is how this is how they fool us, and this is how they pull.
And they're not normal. Eyes. Like, this isn't your grandma, your Catholic grandma we're talking about. There's always a hierarchy. I like to say a cult inside a cult, right? Mm-hmm. Because the little people, they don't know anything. They really just are trying to go to heaven. I mean, like, my husband's family is still Mormon, and they're just good people. Like, honestly, they're just good people. And it makes me sad. And that's why I scream from the mountaintops, because I'm like, this is wrong. Because at the top level, they're not even Masons as far as Mormons. What I've been researching, they were Martinists. No, it's not even normal Masonry. It's like primitive Egyptian, weird Masonic stuff. And I'm like, and I can't prove it, but I can show you a lot of parallels, I'm like, it's the same thing with anything. Do I think all Masons are bad? No. Do I think there's some really shady people involved in that, and they have their own faction? You bet.
You bet. Absolutely. And I would completely agree. And that's something that I think we find when we look at concepts like this is, the answer always lies somewhere in the middle. It never truly sways in the extreme of either direction. And, I think that's why when we get so caught up looking at either end of the spectrum, we're not looking at where the spectrum meets. And I think that's truly where these answers lie. And other than that, Heidi, I wish we could have got to the finders. I do have to start winding down.
You're fine. You're fine.
But other than that, I was going to say, I do have your YouTube and your Apple Podcast link, so they can check out those episodes. Was it 103 and 104?
Let's see. And then Spotify, I drop way more. YouTube, I only drop once a week because they hate my stuff. 104 and 105, because I can't put those on there. They'll ding me so bad. It's like bad. Yeah. And so check those out and see what you guys think. Spotify distributes wherever, so it'll be on all the pod chasers. And you can find me, Heidi Luv, at the Unfiltered Rise, anywhere podcasts are served. I do a lot on Mormons, a lot of other weird stuff, because I just like to do research. So, and then it always goes back to the Mormons.
And you're really good. And I got to say, guys, definitely give Heidi a listen to. I mean, as you've seen with her presentation, she does a very awesome job, especially if you want to just scroll down a little bit in season 2 and see my first episode with her, Cult Mormonism, with the presentation, and that actually had my jaw gape about 3/4 of the whole time. And but it really did. I still talk about that episode to this day to people, and I was like, did you know the Mormons are actually Masons? It's like,
you're
do not let them fool you.
Yeah, magicians apparently now. The one thing that's interesting too about the Finders cult, when you guys look into that, is it goes back to the CIA, and the Mormons basically are the CIA at this point. I'm convinced of that. But anyway, yeah, we'll
No,
leave that
dude. Oh,
alone.
definitely. We're gonna we're gonna do a round 3 in the future for sure.
There you
And
go. Yeah.
but other than that, everybody, please check out Heidi. Heidi, if you don't mind hanging out for just a sec. And
Yep,
then
you're good.
other than that, everybody, thanks for joining me for another BG Cast Wednesday live podcast. We will be back next week. Just like I said at the beginning of the show, for the next few months until season 2 ends, we're going to be pushing it till 6:30 at 6:30 start time instead of 6. Just started the new job, trying to get a feel for everything. So we're just going to bump the show back just a little 30 minutes to give me some extra time. And then next week we have Urban, the nerd in charge, and Official Oven hopping on for a panel. We're going to be talking about a lot of the weird stuff that is going on right now. And then other than that, everybody, thanks again for joining me for another BG Cast Wednesday live podcast. You guys have a good night. I'll catch you next week.